I am kimchi, a spicy fermented cabbage that's always had its place at our dinner table. As the national dish of Korea, I grew up loving it. Eaten with every meal, cooked into hundreds of recipes, my strength and pride came from my country and its food. I watched my mother hunched over a large bucket, spreading the paste with loving care onto every leaf. I am kimchi, a spicy fermented cabbage that did not have a place in my lunchbox at school. Neither did anything else my mom would make me. My culture, my food, who I was, had no place in the world at my school. The first time I became aware of the kimchi making process was in 3rd grade. I didn't understand why my mom had dragged us to church on a Saturday, but all the other kids were there, so I didn't care too much. Running around through another game of tag, I raced through the kitchen where all the women were and stopped, confused. Kimchi was something that had always been there for lunch and dinner, but I'd never seen the process done before. I was fascinated. The game of tag was far from my mind as I sat eagerly across from them. I watched as they pulled cabbage that they had salted the night before out of the sink and placed them into large tubs. Pots of the paste used in kimchi sat on the stove, cooled and ready to be prepared. They mixed the paste with vegetables and spices until it turned from an opaque white to a deep red. Laughter and conversation floated around the room as these women participated in the rituals their mothers and grandmothers had done for years. Years later, I would look back and connect these church kimchi-making events to Kimjang, a kimchi-making festival in Korea that has women in communities come together to make large batches just before winter. Having traveled to this country decades ago, this tradition of coming together to make kimchi had just shown the impact and connectivity the Koreans have with kimchi. They evenly spread the paste across both sides of each cabbage leaf until it's fully coated. Feeling brave, I ventured forward, not exactly sure what I was asking for. The older ladies laughed at the fascination in my eyes and ripped a small piece off that they had just coated and beckoned me closer. This was the first time I tried fresh kimchi, and the flavors were so similar yet so different. They packed the kimchi into containers, and now it was time to wait for the fermentation process to begin. This was the first time I got to watch kimchi being made, but not my last. For years, I would wander into the kitchen late at night. My mother would have just finished salting the cabbage, and the paste was cold and ready to be used. Instantly, I felt like a kid again, just as eager and fascinated as I had been years ago. Sometimes my dad would come out too, the taste of fresh kimchi also on his mind. But these moments with my mom, as she made kimchi laboriously all by herself, had defined my relationship with my culture far greater than I will ever know. I remember the first time I saw kimchi in a news article. I had to double check to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The culture I had almost completely thrown away was now typed up in a 12-point font on my screen, written by a white woman calling it funky and worth a try. Funky. I remember reading the comments under the article. I remember reading the comments under the Facebook post when it crossed my screen again a couple hours later. And for the first time, I was witnessing Americans want kimchi, want Korean food. I should have been happy, but I was only confused. It was a health benefit, something trendy, something unique, no longer regarded in the negative light that I had grown up with. I saw the word microbes in articles more than I saw the word kimchi. America had found its new trend, and immediately I was swept up. Restaurants I had frequented began to raise their prices as more customers would come in. How to make kimchi recipes began to flood YouTube, and the comment sections once again began to rave about this newfound food. But it wasn't newfound, and it wasn't my kimchi. The kimchi I had grown up with was not the kimchi I was seeing. This kimchi was accessible and palatable. Korean food now had to be palatable. I get to see videos of people making Korean food, sharing Korean food, and raving about Korean food. I decided to interview my mom to talk with her about the kimchi process and her opinions. She didn't have much to say, and it ended up being my dad talking mainly, but I feel like she still had some important things to contribute. Because of the scene in Fresh Off the Boat, I was laughed at, and my food was compared to stereotypes like dogs or cat. Having had moved from an Asian-centered community to a larger white community, I was completely out of my comfort zone, and so was my food. I remember feeling shame wash over my face as another lunch was ostracized from the table. And for the first time, I was ashamed of the food I was bringing, and the culture that had taught me this food was acceptable to bring. Like hundreds of Asian children around the world, I begged my mom to stop packing me these lunches, to give me something more normal, more American. So I asked her how she felt looking back.
엄마는 그냥 이제 아메리칸 스쿨이니까 엄마는 doesn't matter.
It seemed to have impacted me greater than it did her, which somewhat surprised me. I then asked her how it felt seeing more commercialized kimchi and the culture fading away from kimjang and other homemade kimchi processes.
엄마들은 죽어. 다행이야.
다행이다요.
베리 할지야. 혼자 살려면 얼마나 힘든 줄 알아?
그러면 엄마는 누가 더 better helper 있었어요? 세라 아니면 저요?
Are you serious?
어.
너 뭐 도와줬니? 세라는 도와줬는데 너는 뭐 도와줬니?
도와줬잖아요. 옆에 서 있었잖아요.
왜? I don't remember. 이번에 와서 김치 해요 그러면.
알았어요. 재밌게 해줄게요. America is always changing, and I know one day the fascination with Korean culture will fade and something new will take over and captivate the target audience. And maybe one day I'll no longer be palatable to the American tongue. Through different phases in my life and understanding my cultural identity, I've watched kimchi become different things to me, holding both positive and negative memories. The history and experience of the ritual will always remain within me, and as I continue to discover who I truly am, kimchi will always be in my fridge, still made the way my mom always did.